I'm not trying to scam anybody here. I'm just...
You're just looking for a handout like every other... Are you employed, Mr. Lebowski?
Well, wait, let me explain something to you. I am not Mr. Lebowski. You're Mr. Lebowski. I'm the dude. So that's what you call me, that or his dudeness or duder or, El Duderino if you're not into the whole brevity thing.
Are you employed, sir?
Employed?
Welcome to Money Unplugged. We all have a relationship with money. That's what this show is about. Our experiences with money, the mistakes we make, what we learn, the opportunities we take advantage of, the things we splurge on. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for spending part of your time listening to these conversations. I really appreciate it. Today on the show, it is my longtime friend and former coworker, Bill Mann. Now, he is the Chief Investment Strategist at Motley Fool Asset Management. He is not only one of the best investors I know, he is also one of the boldest seekers of experiences that I know. Bill is a guy who puts himself out there, literally in the world, to explore different cities and countries and cultures. And as you will hear in this conversation, sometimes that type of approach takes you to places you did not expect. And when it comes to money, Bill's extended family had a big influence on him. That's where our conversation began. So let's get into it with Bill Mann. Do you have an early memory of money?
Yeah. There are two, really. And so my mom's family was from Western North Carolina, and they were both sets of grandparents were obviously children of the Depression. And so they had attitudes towards money that were, I don't know, fear-based, I guess you would say, but definitely trauma-based. And so my mom's mother, and I was her favorite. She was an elementary school teacher in Shelby, North Carolina, and I was her grandchild who loved books. She had rheumatoid arthritis, and so from the time she was in her mid-30s, she was in a wheelchair. And so my grandfather was a soil conservationist for the state of North Carolina. I had to come up with the money to, for medical treatments and things of that nature. And so he had a garden that was probably 3 acres. It was not necessarily a garden. It was a farm. And in the summer, we would go down and we would work. We'd stay with them, but what we'd do is be free labor for them. And we'd go and pick, beans or whatever. And we'd go to the local farmers markets, and my grandfather would swap what he has grown for whatever else he needed. All of the meat that he got came from Ralph Gilbert up the road. All of the corn came from another farmer, and because he grew up in the Depression, he was, I don't know that he was nervous, but he very much paid attention to how he spent money. I guarantee you he didn't set foot in 3 restaurants in his entire life. And I noticed that, and I admire it. I admire it primarily because it's not that he was opposed to eating in a restaurant. He just didn't get any enjoyment from it. He got enjoyment from hanging out with his farmer friends and swapping stuff and seeing how far he could make $1 go. And
so just to be clear, when you're a kid and you're watching this play out, it sounds like from your description that actual money is not changing hands. You're witnessing
a barter economy.
A barter economy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So explaining so my grandfather was a soil conservationist, and I don't know that his salary ever even had a comma in it. In the state of North Carolina, a state worker, but he would go to farmers and teach them about crop rotation, or he would test their soil and say, well, you know what, you really need to be growing soybeans instead of beans for this year, and then next year you can do this. So he was very helpful to people, that he helped change their financial path simply by helping them make better decisions. But because he knew all of these people who were doing these different things, they all sort of worked in a symbiotic way, right? When I describe him, it almost sounds like he was afraid of spending money, and that's not the case at all. He was just very clear on what he enjoyed doing, and it was not frivolous things, but, taught me how to drive on his really, really old Ford pickup truck, 3 on the tree, driving around on the farm when I was like 12, maybe illegal. You have to come and get me, I guess. But
Sounds perfectly safe. Sounds perfectly safe.
That's right.
So that's through the lens of your grandparents. Was money discussed at home, and something that's come up on this podcast before for people of our age growing up, particularly in the 70s? Not really talked about all that much, and I'm curious to what extent, if any, you observed that at home when you were a kid.
Yeah, not really. I mean, my parents were not particularly open about money, except in a joking way. Like, they always joked about the fact that they met in college, and my dad was from New York City, and his dad was an executive with a textile company called Cannon. My mom showed up to school, and because her dad had saved so much money, like, she and her brothers, all 3 had cars, which was kind of a rare thing, at the University of North Carolina in the mid 60s. And so my dad and my mom always joked that they both married each other for their money, and they were both wrong. So they were incorrect in their assumptions. No, it was not particularly discussed. But at the same time, my parents were they were very pragmatic about money. Like, so I've never gone wanting in my entire life. Like, I don't know that I could do a college essay that comes up with any tragedy from my upbringing, right? I had a very comfortable upbringing, but at the same time, my parents didn't just let us spend, right? And it was almost, it was almost like, yes, look, we have a comfortable income. You
have no income.
You have done nothing, right? So get out and mow lawns, get out and, you earn your own keep. And because of that level of comfort, we just didn't really have to discuss it that much. But at the same time, my mom in particular was very clear, like, if she thought, that if something was not worth spending, she would not do it.
What was the first job you had when you were a teenager, I'm presuming?
Yeah, so I had a number.
Let me be clear. What was the first paid job?
Thank you.
You talked about your first job.
That's right.
You were free labor for your grandfather. What was your first paying job as a teenager?
That's right. Yes, I had all of the watermelon that I could eat in his, quote, garden. My first real job was at Chick-fil-A.
What were you doing?
Slinging chicken, man. What do you think I was doing? Yeah, working the fryers, doing cleanup. That's when I learned just how impressive it was, because, for people to do quick change math in their head, because I found myself completely incapable of doing it. So my register was either short or long every single time I did it. So I ended up they didn't let me retain the responsibility of register. Yeah.
The manager rotated you. You got to the register. They observed you, and then they were like, get this kid back.
That's right.
Put him on the fryer.
Look, all we know about him in this situation is he's not stealing. He's just not very bright. That was a fantastic job. And Chick-fil-A, to this day, the one thing that about them is that they are incredibly process oriented, and watching how many different things that they had. This is how you hold a mop. This is how you think about, this is the cleaning protocol. And I thought it was like that at every company, but it wasn't. And there is a reason. And that was one of my first real experiences in recognizing the fact that there is a huge difference between good management and bad management, was when I moved from Chick-fil-A to my next job. And I don't say the company, but it was not the same. Right. And And it really taught me at that time that like those little things matter, right? At Chick-fil-A, the fact that I sometimes ended up with $1.63 too much money in my register, that was as bad as if I had ended up with $1.63 too low, because it meant that somebody did not get exactly what they had asked for, and they had not paid the amount that we had promised them. And it was, that was a great lesson for me.
You went to American University. Do I have this right? You got a degree in international service, and a degree in Japanese?
Japanese and German. They were part of the international service. Okay. Yeah, it was all the same thing. So basically I was apparently fascinated by Axis power languages.
Apparently.
Well, it was, so I graduated in 1992. And if you recall at the time, the Rising Sun book had come out, and everyone thought that Japan was taking over the world. They had the Zaibatsu, which we thought were buying up America. But I was fascinated. I was fascinated with the culture, and I was also fascinated. I don't know if you want to call Japan the Chick-fil-A of countries, but like it is very much similar in terms of how they process things. Like everything is done with pride. Everything has a process to it. Some of it ultimately at the end of the day is not particularly efficient, but it is done absolutely right. Really, really enjoy learning Japanese. I did figure out a couple of years ago, my wife and I and family went back for a lengthy period of time, and my obnoxious confidence in my Japanese was knocked down. What I speak very well now is restaurant Japanese. Everything else is unfortunately atrophied, but yeah, that's what I studied.
At the time, are you thinking, I'm going to take this degree and I'm going to work overseas? International business in Japan is what lies ahead for me?
What American University is really known for is, the School of International Service, and that is a pipeline to the State Department. And so I went through the process of doing the State Department exam. I did the written exam, and I did the oral exam, and I was waiting for a posting basically, and I met this girl, and so I had to shift because she was going to law school, and she's not coming to Chad with me or wherever it was I was going to go. And so I chose her. And at the exact same time, and this will sound bizarre now, but the Soviet Union opened up, and a friend of mine came back from the Soviet Union, from Russia, I should say, because it was Russia by then. And he said, hey, all of the state industries are privatizing and they're selling them. We should buy one.
Buy a state industry in Russia?
Yeah.
Is that what you did?
It is.
What industry did you buy?
Not a whole industry, that's a lot. But we did buy a company called Altai Diesel in a town called Barnaul, which is in Siberia, as you do, about 200 miles from Novosibirsk, which is maybe the big city that people would know. But even if they don't know, it's out in the middle of nowhere. And this was a diesel engine company, and we had we had deals with American companies to do part supply, and we literally were able to buy the company. We bought 34% of the company for less than $40,000.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what was happening at the time. And if you ask me like, hey, that seems really cool, I would say, no, what it really seems is naive and dumb. But it was naive and dumb in a very interesting way.
I was going to say, it sounds like both. It sounds very cool. That is not a lot of money for a third of a company.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I can imagine you showing up in Siberia.
I'm an idiot.
Very much a fish out of water.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and that's what it was. We didn't know what we didn't know, but I did know, and I had learned. I had learned accounting, and I'd learned business analysis, and you would walk through the storage facilities at this company, and there would be like crankshafts, floor to ceiling, that had been built and they were not made, and they were waiting to be packaged up or put into an engine, and they weren't even counted in their inventory. Like, they were literally sitting there and nobody knew they were there. I mean, thousands of them. And so you would go, so it was horribly inefficient because nobody else figured out how to do it. And what we probably should have figured out at the time was that there was a reason why other entities were not, were not taking an interest in this. It was a fantastically valuable experience. I mean, I think most of my experience with Motley Fool really flowed from understandings that I got from that experience. And, I'll say very definitively, we ended up selling our component of this business a couple years later, and it did okay. Didn't end up, being the targets of mafia, which I guess was good. I will put that under the list of things that are
That
positive.
goes on the plus list.
That goes on the plus list, yeah. And that's an unalloyed plus, but
So what is your day-to-day financial life like? I mean, you talked about the business, but I'm thinking about most people when they get out of college, whatever they are doing professionally, their day-to-day financial life often involves, I'm sharing an apartment with a couple other people, I'm keeping my expenses down. What was that like?
So again, and I give credit to my parents for this, and I didn't realize it at the time. And I almost feel like 18-year-old me needs to go back and apologize to my parents, because my dad very proudly told me that he considered it his and my mom's obligation to pay for our schooling. I didn't realize at the time what not just what a gift that was, but what a leg up it was. Because if you think about people who are coming out of college today with hundreds of thousands of dollars in college debt, that is their risk. They've taken the risk, right? Everything that they need to do from that point is earn in order to pay that back or have a chance of paying it back. I came out of college with no debt, and that allowed me to, I'd earned a little bit of money. I mean, obviously I'd come up with enough to buy part of an engine company. I had a cushion, and I thank my parents so much for that, but it was pretty thin otherwise. We were trying to figure out how to make a go of it, and ultimately my day-to-day existence had been paved by the fact that I had that cushion.
I'm assuming some of the pragmatism that you talked about with respect to your mother probably rubbed off on you as well.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And so my dad, my dad's was a corporate attorney. And so he was very comfortable with the concept of taking a risk. And I'm not sure that he really bought into, hey, these guys are going to buy this Russian engine company and it's going to turn into a huge thing. But I know that he said they're going to learn a lot from this process. And he was right. So I had a very pragmatic mom. I have my dad. I wouldn't describe as a huge risk taker, but someone who really had a very healthy relationship with risk. And oddly enough, that's where my wife and I are now, kind of in the same boat.
Here's a little behind the scenes information about Bill Mann, because we didn't talk about it during the episode. But Bill loves and appreciates good food. He loves pretty much every cuisine that's out there. He loves great flavors. That's why I am 100% confident he would love Mar-Mar. It's my favorite chili garlic crunch because it's so versatile. I had it this morning with my breakfast tacos. I put it in pasta sauce, marinades. I got a text message recently from someone. It was just a 5-word question. Mar-Mar in stir fry? And I wrote a 2-word response. God, yes. You can go with the original Mar-Mar, which has amazing flavors. If you're like me and you want a little bit of heat, get the spicy version, you got to try it. Go to ilovemarmar.com, get 10% off when you use the promo code MONEY. You can click the link in the show notes or just go to ilovemarmar.com, get 10% off. Use the promo code MONEY. Make your taste buds happy, people. All right, let's get back to Bill Mann. To what extent did you and your wife talk about money before you got married?
Probably not enough. So we got married after her.
Not enough because there were problems, or just looking back, you think, yeah, we didn't, and maybe we should have.
Chris, let me tell you, it's a disaster. No. So we got married when she was 23. So we got married young. And so the good news is that we didn't have any money to talk about. The bad news is, and you see this a lot with relationships, particularly ones that start when people are a young age, is that as you start to change your means, sometimes people's behaviors change. And we had not really talked enough, although my wife's family came from the exact same philosophy that mine did, which is your education is our responsibility. So she came out of graduate school with the same advantage that I did, which was we are at a starting point that feels like zero, but it is miles ahead of most of the people around us.
It's not a deficit.
It's not a deficit. And it didn't really occur to me until later on just what a gift that was to not worry about that. And it's really something that my wife and I took with our kids. Like from a very young age, we set money aside to make sure that whatever educational experience they wanted was going to be taken care of. And because it's a gift in some ways, but it's also something that it just gives them that much more flexibility to take a risk if they would like to.
Let's go to the speed round. What is a thing that you have bought that makes you happy?
I actually have a bike that I love. And it's a very fancy bike. And it's way more fancy than someone of my morphological shape should be on, right? Like but it's one of those things where when I'm up on that bike, I feel athletic. I feel like I'm really cutting through the air. I must look like a walrus on top of a skateboard, but nonetheless, it brings me a lot of joy just being able to get out. And it's a freedom implement, right? You can go on a bike, you can go miles, and it's all under both your power and a little bit of gravity, but yeah, that's probably it.
Have you ever made a purchase that you regret and sometimes you still think about it?
Oh gosh. So right when I began at the Motley Fool, and I had a little bit of money in my pocket, and I don't know what had gotten into me, but I had this period of time where I don't know, I just kind of wanted to, I wanted to flaunt a little bit. I mean, that sounds terrible, and it was terrible, but I went out.
It sounds human.
Thank you. Yeah. Which is another way of saying terrible. But I had bought this BMW 7 Series, and I'm I'm 29, and the day I got it, it's like, this is amazing. This is fun. And then almost immediately, I just started to feel like I had bought something that wasn't me, right? And so really since that time, I mean, we have cars, we just drive them until the bolts fall out of them. It just was one of those things where I felt like it was going to be something that was going to, communicate success or whatever. This is how I was thinking at the time. But to me, it was just something that I felt after I'd bought it, that I recognized the fact that the purchase did not come from a place of confidence, and it was totally unnecessary.
How long did you have it before you got rid of it?
I drove it till the bolts fell out.
Oh, okay.
I mean, no. It was one of those things. I fully depreciated that car. It was not like I got it and then did the thing like, oh, this is not me. And I did the responsible thing, having done the irresponsible thing. But it was ever since then. It was really a reminder to me that things are not what we really ought to be focusing on, that, it's experiences, it's friends and things like that. And those are so much more important to me.
What is one thing about money that you wish you knew earlier?
Well, the compounding works. It's funny. I got a letter a couple of months ago, and it was addressed to me, but it was actually to my dad. My dad had bought 3 shares of IBM for my sister when she was 16, and she was 16, so she forgot about it, and he had bought it directly from the company, so he had forgotten about it. So this letter shows up at my house, and this is truly found money. Right. And this is IBM we're talking about. It's not like, it's not like we accidentally bought Amazon or something. It's a company that's faded a little bit. And the $110 or whatever he spent on 3 shares was $5,800 worth because they've been reinvesting dividends the entire time. Like, it really, really works. I think that's the primary lesson. And that's also something that Buffett says that, that you can take most seriously. Like, the earlier you start, developing good attitudes towards money, the better it's going to pay off.
What is the last thing you splurged on just for yourself?
I'm kind of mad about this unfashionable little English football club called Newcastle United. And last year I had a friend who was there who said, "Hey, listen, I have tickets for this weekend and I can't use them. Would you like them?" He's like, "Assume no." But as soon as he said it, I was like, "I think you should assume yes." And just got on a plane and went.
Nice.
Yeah, just went and got to hang out with these 52,000 insane football fans for the weekend. And so that's probably it.
That's a splurge.
It was totally a splurge. I mean, it was a terribly expensive plane ticket, but like, you go all that way to get free tickets to a match, right? You just do it.
What is a charitable cause that you like to support?
So I am on the board of a women's health organization called the Fistula Foundation. And the Fistula Foundation provides free surgeries to women, primarily in Africa, but then also places like Bangladesh and Afghanistan, who have had injuries in childbirth. And these injuries are things like when, in this country, a woman will go to the hospital and give birth, and inevitably there are tears and things that need to be sorted away. But if you think about it, what happens if those little injuries don't get solved, like aren't taken care of right there, and they become very debilitating? So it is a tiny surgery that just creates a tremendous amount of value for these women and their families. And so, a couple of years ago, I started thinking about charitable giving like I would think about investing. Like, what can I do where my dollars go as far as possible?
Do you have a favorite movie or TV series that has money as a through line?
I mean, I love Succession. Right? Because it is a bunch of people who are so sincerely broken because of money, right? Like, we all think that money equals happiness. You could look at Succession, and it is actually based on another family. I think it's the Murdochs, and say, those are people who I would not want to be like with, for anything, including what they have. But the really interesting thing to me about Succession is that from a corporate governance standpoint, all of the things that they do in the show are like, it's actually good corporate practice. Like, they didn't take too many corners on how you would run a company in order to make it better television. Like almost all of it is pretty spot on.
Last thing is a penny for your thoughts. It's a bit of wisdom that you've picked up in your life that you can share with people. It doesn't have to be about money. It can be, but it can be about anything.
I think one of the things that attracted me originally to the Motley Fool, having come from the background of the philosophy that I had, was that people tend to underestimate how it is that they're going to react under stress. and financial stress being a big one. And we're not really talking topicality right now, but as you and I are talking now, we have been in this country and maybe globally under some real financial stress, and people are feeling it. And if you think about the American experience, it is an experience of plenty. But if you pull back just a little bit, there's something called relative scarcity, and it feels much worse. And so one of the things that I think is so powerful for people during times of stress is just taking note of how you feel right then, because you can't manufacture it later on. Like the act of just writing down, like, this is what worries me and this is how I feel, and having that as a North Star for how you behave during times of plenty and during times when people are much more relaxed will solve problems for you down the road that will save you money, headache, everything else that you can imagine. It is a transformational thing that you can do.
There you go. You can follow Bill Mann on social media and find out more on the Motley Fool Asset Management website. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.